This is the Jedburgh Podcast. I'm the creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Each episode, I speak with transformative leaders, visionaries, drivers of change, and those dedicated to winning, no matter the challenge. The Jedburgh Podcast is founded in the lineage of the special operations Jedburgh teams of the past and is produced in partnership with Talent War Group, a management consulting and executive search firm focused on helping you optimize the people side of your business. We're sponsored by Jersey Mike's Subs. Together, we share the mission of giving, making a difference in someone's life. Visit the Jedburgh Podcast, Talent War Group, and Jersey Mike's Subs on the web and on social media. A percentage of all proceeds is dedicated to the Special Operations Warrior Foundation. The ruck march is simple in theory. Throw some weight on your back and walk a set distance. But in practice, the ruck march can be a leisurely walk to the store, or it can be a grueling test of personal strength, perseverance, and drive. It can bring teams together or break even the strongest competitors. It can set the example for building resilient teams and communities, or it can be a deeply personal journey to find solace and growth. Jason McCarthy is the founder at GoRuck, a company he concepted in Africa in 2007 and has grown to over $100 million in sales. It started as a gear company, but has become an international fitness movement bringing together veterans, civilians, law enforcement, and all those dedicated to putting in the work and feeling a little bit, or a lot, of pain. For this episode, I took a detour off I-95 and stopped in Jacksonville Beach to meet Jason and his team. We reminisced about our days in 10th Special Forces Group, our commitment to live up to the honor and prestige of the regiment, the importance of a relentless pursuit of quality and standards, and what you owe when you admit it was your first time. We also talked the history of GoRuck, the importance of networks and community, and how COVID has changed our perspectives on life, family, work, and society. Finally, we discuss impact and Jason's commitment to disrupting the fitness industry through his launch of Sandlot technology and the Sandlot app, an initiative focused on empowering trainers and democratizing their connection with fitness lovers. Join us for this episode and check us out live at GoRuck's first annual Sandlot Jax Fitness Festival, April 22nd to 24th in downtown Jacksonville, Florida. Jason's goal has always been to bring people together to do fun and hard things. Sandlot Jax will be no different. The Jedburgh Podcast team will be there in full force covering the entire event and putting in the work. We'll see you there. Jason, welcome to the Jedburgh Podcast.
Great to be here, man.
In true GoRuck fashion, I have to disclose, and I know we talked about it earlier, but for the audience, especially those who are going to watch this on YouTube and watch the video, I'm like going on 4 straight days right now because I thought it was fitting, since GoRuck is all about pushing yourself to the extreme. How long can you go? My day, like today for me, started on Tuesday when I was in India. Okay. And you're laughing, right? But because but I woke up. So like it would have been essentially like Tuesday night here in the US was when I woke up, started traveling to enter India from Ahmedabad to Delhi, had like a 14-hour layover, then took a 17-hour flight.
Probably got all sorts of rest there, man. Like nobody feels sorry for you.
Yeah, right. No, so I got a hotel, but I went to the gym. That's what I did when I was there. I went to the gym and I prepped this conversation. Those are the two things I did. I never actually laid on the bed in the hotel room. And then I took the 17-hour flight back here, landed yesterday morning, went to the house, packed up the car, and the whole family, so including the dog, the 2 kids, the wife, and the boat in tow, have now driven down to Florida en route to South Florida, but have stopped here at GoRuck to spend some time with you.
And go to the beach and have all you guys are just down in Florida. You're so excited. You know, we were just over that state line and you're like, man, this is awesome. Let's stop somewhere awesome as fast as we can and enjoy it.
Yeah. And the first place you come across is Jacksonville Beach. So just pull over. Let's see what Jason's doing. But it's been a while since you and I last met, and you were pulling out pictures before we started, but it was the Green Beret Foundation dinner several years back. I think it was like 2016 was the last time that you and I think were in the same room. But it is awesome to be back here with you. And it's my first time to the GoRuck headquarters. Absolutely incredible what's going on here.
First time, you owe a case of beer. You know the rules.
I do, and I didn't bring any beer.
You know it. You walked into that on your own accord, and you know it.
I've already failed. I've already failed in this mission. But this episode is going to be the third in our lead up to the Sandlot Jax Fitness Festival. And we're going to talk about Sandlot Jax. I want you to explain it, but we started the 3 episodes with Jason Khalipa, 2008 CrossFit Games champion, world's strongest man. That episode went out a couple weeks ago. Awesome story about AMRAP, as many reps as possible. For anyone who didn't see it, they have to check it out because he smoked the shit out of me too after we got done. I was sick the rest of the day. Don't tell him. But because I don't want him to know I was faking it the whole time. But that was a great episode. And then we had...
But also his daughter's story and stuff. I mean, he's got such a great story there, you know?
The like whole mentality.
Cancer and overcoming it and like how to fight. You know, it's one thing to train for the CrossFit Games. It's another to, you know, be the rock and help your daughter fight for her life.
Oh, 100%. And they applied that AMRAP to how they treated themselves, the family, and the fight against leukemia with their daughter. It was just so inspirational. And I left that with like a renewed commitment to just applying focus. So impressive what he did there. Then we had Sarah Wilkinson. And Sarah Wilkinson's husband, Navy SEAL Chad Wilkinson, died by suicide. And her story was so powerful. And for me to be able to speak with her, tell her story, tie it into veteran suicide awareness, veteran mental health, and what she's also done in the fitness space. And I know she's a really close partner with you and with GoRuck, and you guys have built a tremendous relationship over the years. But
she and Emily are surf and amigas too.
Are they really?
It's great. It's great.
Well, her story is just fantastic, and we were able to share that. And then now we get to share yours and talk about GoRuck. And, you know, it's the story of GoRuck. I read the book, How Not to Build a Backpack Company. And there's so many things you take away in the entrepreneurial spirit. You know, how do you actually... When you come up with an idea, so many people have good ideas, but it's always about execution, and it's always about the willpower, the drive, the resiliency, the adaptability. We talk about the 9 characteristics of elite performance on the podcast. That's our, that SOF uses. That's our grounding function here. And you had to demonstrate all of those in so many different ways as you were building GoRuck. And I think a lot of people look at GoRuck and they're like, oh, well, it's been there and they exist in the veterans community, but the amount of work that has gone into building this company to what it is truly inspirational. And I look forward to talking more about it. But I want to talk about Sandlot Jax first. It's coming up. This episode's going to release the day before it launches. We're coming down here. Jedburgh Podcast on location. We have a World War II Land Rover ambulance with a podcast studio set up in the back of it. It's going to be our first on location activation, so we're super pumped.
Another
about
case
that.
of beer.
Oh no! I'm going to start a little a tick.
Oh,
mark
don't worry,
here.
I've got it. It's running in my head. You're good.
I'm going to owe so much beer at the end of this. But we're pumped, and we're coming down here. We're going to do this activation. We're going to and the partnership with you and everybody else who's coming is really, really exciting for us in 2022. But talk to me a bit about Sandlot Jax. What was the theory behind it? What is it? Why'd you come up with it? What do you want to achieve?
So it really started with GoRuck and kind of my natural response or reaction to what the pandemic became, right? And we're in Florida, so we recovered more quickly than most, right? Just in terms of this.
Did they ever stop?
No, they shut our beach down for 30 days.
Did they really?
Very early on in the pandemic. It was like you're shutting the beach down, and then it turned the street next to the beach into this congested walkway It's like, what are we doing here? We shut the beach down, right? And to go back to some history on this, like Florida was crazy because we opened the beaches. Remember this? They don't ever go back and sort of say, sorry, we got this wrong. It's just, they did. We opened up the beaches and people were on the beaches breathing around each other and soaking up sunshine. And that was supposed to be what? It's called freedom down here.
Yeah. That's the place where you're supposed to be in the outside.
Yeah.
That's where they told you to go.
So I just, what I did not like about our response in America, and, I love this country and I owe it more than I can ever pay back. I owe the Special Forces Regiment more than I can ever pay back, and I love this country. And there's the response, though, that too many people that I saw were just focused on the wrong things in the whole response to this. What if, instead of all the parlor tricks that we played, what if we would have had a reasonable discussion about health? What if we would have said, what is health? How am I healthy and happy? And how do I achieve that type of, fulfillment out of life? And when you look at it, what we know from time in the Army, that is the avatar for my experience of happiness, right? Because you have a small team, you share a mission, and you'll do anything for each other. It's kind of like family unit.
Even if you don't like each other.
Yeah,
it's
no
wild.
matter what. It's wild, and it just cuts. Nobody cares. You can be black, white, purple, pink, polka dotted, whatever, man. It's like you're on that team together, and it's the same in a family. It takes on a different hue at times, but a family is the same. You'll do anything for your kids or your wife or your loved ones, right? And so that is what binds us together. That is what we think about on our deathbed. That is what matters the most in our lives. And what we were told to do is to isolate and to stare at everybody on screens and and we were just injecting fear. And there was no reasonable discussion around how do we define success. There was no reasonable discussion really around anything, right? And so at its core principle, it's like we are social creatures and we need to be around each other and we need to go outside and we need to sweat and we need to do heart-friendly things and we need to focus our energy and our stress levels onto stuff like that and not just on working out or working in front of a screen all day and then feeling shamed into working out now in front of a screen and all that stuff. And so it's like back to the roots of let's throw the biggest party that we possibly can in the capital of freedom in the universe. Let's take out this big giant green field at Met Park right on the river, downtown Jacksonville, this town that we know and love, right?
Your hometown.
Emily was born here. I moved here in '92, which is kind
almost.
She's like, oh, you're not really from here. Like I've only been here since '92, babe. Right? And it's like then let's all these people that we have missed, that we have not seen, and because of what we've sacrificed, both correctly and incorrectly. And I'm not here to like go back in time. You can't go back. What we can do is go forward. And say, let's invite them and say, hey, come, bring your communities, bring yourselves, and we're gonna help the communities all activate. Like, what do you want to do when you're here? And so, we're building an obstacle course with Savage Race, right? Like Rogue Fitness is bringing down, rig, strength and conditioning equipment. There's challenges there. GoRuck's here, so there'll be a bunch of trainer-led classes with all the trainers. And then there's the Fit Talks, the kind of the our TED style talks, which we're filming with like 30 plus world-class trainers, thought leaders, entrepreneurs, all that stuff. But really it's just a big giant party, and it's fitness in nature, because social is the glue. And this is my personal belief, like the AAR of the after action review of what's gone on is the social fitness component of our lives is the glue. Being social is the glue to our mental happiness, our physical, happiness, our all of that stuff. And we've just murdered it in the last couple of years. And it's been the greatest assault on community and social fitness ever, because it's the first time you could do it. You could just make everything virtual, and it's not working. So let's go back to what works.
And I think we're seeing that. I think you're seeing a lot of companies, and that's what I'm hearing, and I'm seeing in my own company and in the people that I'm working with. I mean, like I said, I just got back from India because we hadn't seen each other as a company in 2 years. And we went out there because it was important to build that relationship, build that bond. I started working with this company. It's been a year that I've been working with them, and it's been now about 6 months where I've been primarily full time. And I feel like I just started. That was how I left everybody in India when I left. It was, this may have well been my first 2 weeks on the job, because I feel like we've achieved more in the time that we've spent together over 2 weeks than we have in the last 6 months apart.
So when everything is virtual, there is an enormous dehumanization that occurs.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's transactional.
We're wise to remember this, right? You see someone on Zoom, and the thoughts that you have before you get on and the thoughts that you have after, it's kind of not the same when, like we were just in here shooting the breeze while you were setting up, and there's kind of just, right, that comes into this interview where I'm kind of ribbing you about, man, have you been out of the team room too long when you start admitting everything's your first time?
Apparently I have.
Brother. Case of beer, 1, 2, right? But it all kind of builds into the rapport and just the natural human stuff that we got to get back to that, right? And I get it. I'm for handling some stuff with Zoom. I'm for technology. I'm pro these things. But we have to remember that this is the best. Coming together with the people in the real world is the best, and it's also the healthiest.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you mentioned Savage Race, you mentioned Rogue Fitness, you mentioned this bank of speakers. I want to dig into the bank of speakers for a minute because it also brings up something that you spoke about in the book. It's a component of special operations, and this is this sense of community. You're talking about it here in terms of the broader societal norms that we've established over the last couple of years. But in SF, when you were and so everybody understands, we were both in 2nd Battalion 10th Special Forces Group. You left, I think, right as I got there. Mm-hmm. We have the common friendship of Corey Wiebeck, who you go back a long time with. I go back a long time with. So you had him in his past. I have him in his present. I think we've traded babysitting of Corey, but. we're laughing here. We can't even
the youngest SF dude in history.
He is the youngest SF guy. I wonder if he still is. We were talking about this the other night.
He's got to be one of them.
I mean, I don't know who else how they could have come in much younger.
Yeah.
But this sense of community, the importance of the network, I think resonates so well with the GoRuck story and manifests itself here with an event like Sandlot Jax. When you look at this bank of speakers, and I can name a couple of them on here, you have Juliet Starrett, Ryan Mannion, Michael Rodriguez, Dr. Matt Miller, Melissa Urban, Gideon Akonde, Sal Frazella. We mentioned Jason Kalipa, Stu Smith, John Hankey. I mean, this list goes on, and I could give all their titles, and none of that would do them justice. But can you talk a minute about the importance of building this community, what networking does for not only businesses, but for people and their personal connection with each other when you're trying to achieve something like this?
I mean, these are friends of ours. These are really good friends of ours who are coming, or they're really good friends of someone else. And most of them are it's taken a career, a lifetime to get to know them. And Em jokes, she's like, we basically cashed in every favor we ever had and said, please come to this party, right? And I'll give you one example is John Hankey, right? Mm-hmm. So his background is he started a company called Keyhole, which was bought by Google. It's a mapping terrain software. It was used in the first Gulf War, right? And it was all over CNN. Anyway, the founders of Google brought him in. Google Earth, Google Maps, Google Street View, Google Local, all were his.
Wow.
Right? So before you heard of them, mm-hmm. he was managing those. And then that's kind of a big deal when you say, hey, I'm gonna oversee the project of Street View. Like I'm gonna put cameras on cars and drive over the entire country and the world.
The world.
Right. That was and so then he took that and took that kind of mapping background, not gaming background, although he had that as well, but and applied that to Niantic, which came out with Pokemon Go. Right. So Pokemon Go is like a geospatial video game. You have to move in the real world. So you say,
and that went wild.
Fitness festival, right? So what's, Pokemon Go doing there? People walked 7 billion kilometers in 2021 playing Niantic games, right?
Wow.
I mean, it's a $9 billion company and it's kind of created inside of John's brain. Right. And we go way back because Emily took like this is how it's always the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, and you've got to say yes to stuff. If something comes, you say yes. And there was a mutual friend, a guy had found GoRuck. His name's Rock Myers. He was one of the guys that helped develop the SIPRNet, right? And did other stuff.
The classified network that the military works
and
on.
Other stuff in Vietnam and all that kind of stuff. Like just one of these great Americans that you've never heard of, Got like 4 followers.
Changed the world.
4 followers on Instagram, stuff like that. Lives out in the middle of nowhere in New Mexico with his incredible wife. Anyway, and he was like, "Hey, I see this world where GoRuck that does these team building events could work with some of the live events that Niantic is putting on for this previous game that they had called Ingress, right?" And so we did, and we met them, and Emily flew out to San Francisco when Niantic was still inside of Google, and put them through a little mini event. Right, for their team, which was not a quote GoRuck event, and they all showed up, and it was team building, and they smiled, and it's like, hey, yeah, come out and try this. This is like 8 years ago. This is long before anyone ever heard of Pokemon Go, and we happen to just really like them. Right, I mean, they're fighting the same fights in a different way. John was in the State Department. He served our country over in Asia and stuff like that. But it's like, and then all of a sudden, you fast forward to now, and we've been in touch with them. Their family's great. They're friends of ours. It's like, John, please come, right? Like the world, because he's fighting this fight about, he called the metaverse a dystopian nightmare, right? Because it is. This idea of haptic suits and you're plugged into, some mainframe shoved through your ear or your brain or whatever, and just don't move. All the feelings will be the same. Just sit there in your haptic suit, right? And it's kind of it's not going to work. We're human. And so he wants to move society forward with technology. And that's the same way of life that we believe in as well. And so the list kind of goes on and on, but a lot of the people in health and fitness, there's CrossFit people, there's people that, the Michael Easter, who was the editor at Men's Health or the fitness editor at Men's Health, he wrote about rucking a long time ago, and I was like, wow, this guy's great. I tracked him down. He did a GoRuck Heavy, which is a 24-hour event. We just stayed in touch because he would come up with new articles. He's a great writer. He's going to be one of the premier writers in health and wellness and fitness by, as his career progresses. But nothing happens overnight in this. And what I'm getting at with your original question about community building and partnerships and all this stuff, if all you're doing is picking up the phone when you need somebody, first off, that's not that great. Like it's more fun to work with the people that you want to spend time with, because those are the people that share your values, is the people that you want to spend time with, literally. Whether you're posting about it on wherever, whether they can do anything for you. It's like getting the joy and the fulfillment out of time with people who you like. And then when you have an opportunity to invite them to a party that you're throwing, or to say, hey, would this make sense if, those are fun, because you don't kind of lament the idea of, oh man, I got to pick up the phone and call that person, or oh man, they just texted me, or oh man, their email, I saw it, I don't even want to open it, right? Those are terrible. Don't work with those people and spend your time elsewhere. Yeah. And so it's kind of like Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse, right? Be nice. And especially give the time to the people that you really respect and care about, and then try to work with them. And this is just a series of touch points that you have, and it's like any relationship. You have to kind of grow and foster it, and that's how the best partnerships happen, is when they're just kind of natural.
Yeah. I think that I'm laughing still about, your point about when you see somebody text and it's like, oh, I don't want to answer. You see the email, and I'm thinking about the couple of emails I got this morning when we were driving down here that I literally was like, don't even open it. I don't want to see what happened. But
it's like mood roulette, right? It's mood roulette. You open that and it's like all of a sudden your anxiety levels start to go up, and first off, you probably live in a virtual life with that person. You've dehumanized them. They're just a name in your email inbox, like someone spammed you from wherever. And it's like less of that. Deep breaths.
Well, we have. I think of the term agency. Like we have agency here, where we get to choose. And for so long, you think that you have to make certain associations. You have to do certain things. I think we talked a bit about COVID, and one of the big things that people have learned, I think, coming out of COVID is that you have a choice. You can choose who you associate with. You can choose what you do with your life. You can choose the people you surround yourself with and the path that you follow. And what you're seeing now in society is people who are actually now seizing those choices, and they're taking that autonomy, they're making decisions on how they live their life, and then they're executing on it.
Well, I mean, we throw these big words out about, personal responsibility, but what does that mean to you? Right? Like, look yourself in the mirror and say, what does that mean to me? We talk about words like freedom, And what does that mean, though? What are we going to do with most things are best when you view them as action verbs, right? What does it mean to be free, right? There's no shackles, man. This is America. The true shackles do not exist here. Go over towards somewhere closer towards Russia and China and other places. Like there's a lot of shackles
going
there
on right now.
Here, I mean, the shackles that we have is trying to keep up with the Joneses or live someone else's life, or these things that are eating away at too much of our soul because we're focused on the wrong things. But it's not because we lack freedom. And so it has been a great reminder of these universal and foundational principles upon which America was founded. And I think that's great. And let's view that as a positive, because it is, regardless of what the past held. I mean, it is what it is at this point. There's nothing we can go back to change time, right? And we have this opportunity before it slips away to continue to lead this examined life and make decisions on that, not just pontificate, not just philosophize about it, but to actually, like, what's your health worth to you? I don't just mean, your heart rate when you go to the doctor, or your blood pressure levels. I mean, like, your happiness and your mental health, your physical health, your social health, the time that's ticking away. What's that worth to you? And what are you sacrificing in order to not live your best life? Like, what are you doing? Is it worth it? And when it's not worth it, then make a change. The first step, though, is you gotta understand the problem, and it's been a great wake up call to understanding a lot of us with problems, right? And like, I mean, my problem was it's like, sure, I'll get on a plane and go wherever. Sure, I'll go there. Sure, I'll go do that. Say yes to that's the drug, man. And it was great. The best part about COVID was I got to spend more time with my family. I got to remember to prioritize them first above all, right? And I got to see my kids play every night, climbing on our Jeep like it was the jungle gym, because it was, and it's just, things got simpler, and reminding ourselves that simpler is better. We get to define what that means for us. But it was a great reminder. And so the thing is now is, don't let it slip away. Don't just start chasing everything again, because it's like, oh, that was great. Nice reset. Let me get back to the exact life I had before. Yeah,
you can't look at it as like a point in time where it was like some sort of, short vacation, right? It's got to change your lifestyle. I mean, I agree with you 100%, and I think that you never want to say that something like COVID was the best thing that ever happened, because people are going to look and they're going to say, oh, well, what do you mean? People That's not, nobody's saying that, but I agree with you 100% that for me, for my family, to be able to be almost forced to spend that time together with nowhere to go allowed me to experience things with my son now, who had just been born when COVID started, that I never got to have with my daughter. And I think now back, he just turned 2, and I'm like, wow, this has been an entirely different period of 2 years than I've ever had in my life. And I used to go away when we used to go away for, going away for a month was nothing. You go away for,
right after you were gone for 8 months.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I did a year in Iraq in the infantry, and then I went to SF and I did 8 months. I came home for 6. I went back for another 8. And then when I was home for the 6, I think I went away 2 or 3 times during that. And then subsequently after the second 8 was gone over and over again for the rest of my career. And I will tell you, I was gone for 2 weeks this last couple of weeks, and it felt like a year, because so much has changed in my perspective, and the ability to want to now stay closer to those that you love, want to be a part of what they're going through. And it was a totally different emotional event that it had always been in the past for me.
Yeah, so I try to say this from a position of, like, when you're always chasing the next thing and they're admirable things, right? You can feel a lot of praise. I'm chasing the war drug. I'm chasing the business drug. I'm chasing the partnership. I got this event I got to be at. But we pride ourselves on doing hard things, on being introspective people, on being, warrior poet types, right? Lead the examined life because we're Marcus Aurelius and all that type of stuff, right? And a lot of that chasing, as admirable as it is, it comes at a cost. And oftentimes guys like us are not actually having that conversation with ourselves about what is this costing. And I think that it's like I can chase another 50 miler, I can chase another business trip, I can chase another deployment, right? But am I willing to do the hard thing of investing, 2 straight years with my family at my house and really going through that and learning to embrace that, because it's not easy. It's also very rewarding. And it's like going to war isn't easy, but it's very rewarding. I'm a better person because I went to war, right? It's the same contradiction of COVID. I'm a better person because my wife, Emily, and I went through COVID with our family together. We are, everything is better, right? Except the people that we've lost, which is a natural part of life. And we have to grieve for that as we do other losses in our lives, of which we have many, right? But it's that contradiction, and so what is missing are the real conversations around that, like this, right? It's just sound bites about, you can't say COVID was good, you can't say these kinds of things because nobody's going to listen to anything after you say that, right? But if you follow, how is it good? Like, why? I mean, I remember being fascinated by people who had been to war before I was. I mean, tell me about it. Like, it's this crazy spectrum of human experience and emotions and all of that. And you try to learn about it, but you can't until you go. And you can't learn about how great it is to, be there when your wife has your kid. You can't know what it's like to be in the middle of COVID when you're literally forbidden and shamed to go see anybody else. It's like you're just on lockdown.
Yeah, we couldn't leave our apartment. People were in New York. If you went, we lived on the 24th floor, and you wouldn't make eye contact with people those first couple of weeks. It was like the apocalypse.
Someone coughs, it's oh my God, run the other way.
But people would walk. And New York, people will say New York's a friendly place. I'll say,
who says that?
No, they do. It's wild, and I think in some ways it is a friendly place, but in a lot of ways it's not a friendly place. But if you could say that it became like an adversarial place so quickly within 2 days, you did not look people in the eye because you felt that if you looked at this person, you were going to get something. You didn't know what you were going to get, but if you looked at them, you were going to contract it. And that was what it was like living in the.
We need to unwind that fear. That this is the part of the kind of examining where we are. There's still kids that are outside, with masks on, and it just because they're comfortable in their masks because it's been conditioned, and I don't want to get into the mask debate or whatever, right? It's just more. A lot of things have been conditioned, and the fear part is just you cannot go through life afraid. It is a cancer, because that's the great transformation that I had to learn mentally when I first showed up in Iraq. I was still just very afraid to die, right? And on some level, you're kind of always afraid to die.
I don't think that ever goes away.
But you have to learn how to operate, and you learn, if I let this fear consume me, it's going to get me killed, right? And in this case, if you let fear consume you, you're just going to waste your life away on it's going to consume you. You're trading this time that's just it's got this negative hue all over it because it's laced with fear, and that's something that at some point, man, if it's your time, it's your time, and you got to make peace with that.
Yeah, I mean, fear is natural, and I think the first step in overcoming fear, and we've had a number of different conversations in other guests that we've had on where we've talked about fear. Laura Wilkinson, Olympic diver, is one that comes to mind, where we had a really deep conversation about overcoming fear and the fact that the first step in overcoming fear is understanding and accepting that it's there. And once you can understand that it's there, then you can say, okay, well, what am I going to do to act? And you have to understand and accept the fact that you have to act. You can't not do anything, because if you don't do anything, how do you ever expect to achieve anything?
Then you're leaving your outcome up to the world, and the world does not care about you. I mean, it will consume you like that, right? And so you have to navigate through that. You have to. And, we just have not had any conversation about risk, acceptable risk, right? I mean, there's what is success in all of this? Is success that nobody dies? Is success that what are we willing to trade to try to, reduce whatever risk there is? I mean, there's vaccines, there's we're a lot smarter now. There has to be some risk. Wherever you are on this journey, life has risk. And you have to learn how to navigate what you're willing to accept and what you're not. We all have crazy stuff. Like, I'll give you an example. All the special forces stuff and guns and jumping out of planes and all this stuff. Like, I viewed it as an acceptable risk because you're training for this, and it's a cultural thing. And so, yes, I'm willing to do this. Cycling on the side of the road in Florida is not an acceptable risk to me personally.
Yeah.
Right? It's like there's teenage drivers out there. I have no control over them.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm on a lane that's 2 feet away. Like, for me, that's just not an acceptable risk for me. I'm not saying that should be or should not be an acceptable risk for you or anybody out there. That goes to the definition of freedom. I'm just saying that for me, I just don't have a lot of interest in taking those kinds of risks. And we all have those. Just accept them and kind of move forward.
Yeah. Let's talk about the biggest risk that you've taken, and I'm going to tie that back to building GoRuck. And I want to kind of go back to the beginning of GoRuck. You came up with the idea in Africa. It's 2008. You're in Africa with Emily. You had recently gotten out of the military, and you have this thought that there's an opportunity here to bridge the gap in what you called from Baghdad to New York City, and you came up with this concept for GoRuck. Can you talk about the early stages?
So it was actually the December of 2007. I was on block leave, 30-day leave, after we'd gotten back from Iraq. And she was posted over there. She was with the agency, and she was posted over there. So it was the first time we'd lived together, quote, quote, for 5 years, right? And trying to figure out, because I was going to get out later in 2008. What am I going to do when I go back for a year or whatever? Anyway, I was in that war deployment mindset, right? I just come from Iraq, and in West Africa, they love a good coup there. So
yeah, I spent almost 2 years across Africa, so I know.
It's like just pops up. Iraq felt, at some point, it felt safer. You have your gun trucks in your team, and you're at war, and kind of like Sadr City is kind of a bad place. You kind of learn how to navigate there. It's just kind of crazy, right? But it was like, I just made her some go bags. Hey, put this in your car. It's just stuff you need just in case they start to coup, right? Or keep this at your house. Extra, there's radios, running shoes, water, some self-defense stuff, stuff like that you just need just in case. And it's like, oh, what should I do when I come back, later in 2008? She's like, oh, you should do the GoRuck thing, was what Em said. I'm like, okay. So I went back to Fort Carson then, and I kind of just, that seed had been planted. So, I was busy. Like, we had a couple deployments after that. It wasn't even a thing, but I started it, planted a good seed, and was like, okay, well, I'll work towards being able to do that later in 2008. And it's, to kind of fast forward, because it morphed so many times. It turned into manufacturing, and when nobody wanted to buy the stuff after 2 years of all I had and then some, came up with an event based on our training, trying to just do what I knew. And all I knew was what I'd learned in Special Forces. The biggest risk that I took really was to care about GoRuck, because it was a hobby for a while. It was something to do that I was going to do to pass the time. And when I say that the risk was to care about it, I don't say that flippantly. And what I mean is, what I never wanted to do was to get out of Special Forces and be the guy that was just trying to trade on that name, right? I think about the guys that I served with, that I went to war with, that I would still do anything for, right? And it makes me almost puke in my mouth to think about, they would see something that I was doing and they would be like, WTF, right? Like, just want, because that's how it works, man.
Yeah,
like you get blackballed in the shadows.
Yeah,
and it is something that I just was never willing to trade any degree of anything to get blackballed by the guys who I served with. And so it's like, how can I do this if I want to do it at all? And what kind of changed was when it became about more than the gear, and we started, running these events, and it was about building better Americans and kind of building that bridge between the military and the civilian world. And it was about giving credit to the regiment for training me to be able to give back. And I felt really grateful. It was a way for me to apply some energy that I had no idea. The transition was hard. I had no idea what to do with my energy. And what I found was that bringing people together of all walks of life in this country and kind of whooping it on a little bit. Don't care if you're, don't care if you're black or white or gay or straight or black or female or purple, pink, polka dotted, an alien, whatever. It's like, put the rucksack on the back and pick up the log.
Right.
And it cut through. Nobody talked about politics. Nobody talked about any of that stuff. You just have people that are there working together, and there's just such a purity to it. And it felt great. And so started to bring on some of the guys that guys that we know and had worked with, and it's kind of our way of giving back, and it just kind of clicked for me. And so this ability to give back and tell the story and feel like I was making a difference in building that bridge and representing what Special Forces meant in a way that honored it. And it's not a charade. I'm not out here to just make a quick buck. I really don't care, man. It's kind of like, Emily's like, you are just 1,000% idealist. And I just want you to know that's not always the easiest kind of person to be around. Right. And I'm like, I idealize and I idolize the men in our regiment. And I just don't want to betray that. And no amount of money is worth that ever. And so it was always about the way that I would wanted to conduct that and to represent. Like, if you're going to say you were in Special Forces, you better carry that torch well, because if you don't, it's everlasting shame. And I just never wanted that.
Yeah, well, you represent the regiment in perpetuity. And I talk about this with athletes that I work with and in executives in organizations. I mean, I tell my daughter this right now. I mean, she goes to school and she's starting, this is her second year of lacrosse now. And I tell her that all the time, that you represent your organization in everything that you do forever. You don't get to walk away and be like, oh, well, that was then, this is now, especially when it comes to special forces. I mean, you are talking about, and I say it all the time, this is one of the greatest, if not the greatest organization on the face of the earth when it comes to the ability to take people from different walks of life, bring them into an environment, baseline them in the same common set of core values, and then align them to a cause that this small group of people will have strategic impact on things that you may not even realize happen for 5, 10, 20 years. And you see that day in and day out, and they run to the sound of gunfire time and time again.
It's a privilege and an honor, right?
Always.
Yeah,
it's a highlight. I was thinking about it actually on the drive down here, and it's hard to say. I never want to say it's the highlight of my life, because I think you have your kids and you have your family and you build other things in your life, and you get to do, and I've been fortunate to have gone so many places and met so many people and do so many cool things, but there is nothing like donning the green beret and just sense of achievement. But that sense of achievement on that day, though, is only the day one, because you have to earn it, and that is the best part about the organization. And I think about the special operations truth of quality is more important than quantity. Something that you've talked about a lot with GoRuck. It's something that I identified a lot with you when I read the book, and I've come to know GoRuck over the last several years, and I've built the podcast. It's always this strict adherence to quality. It's this not compromising on standards. And how many times do I go back to the team and say, no, do it again. You left one thing out, and they're like, but no one will notice. And well, I noticed. And if I notice, then it doesn't matter if anyone else notices, because I don't want to look at it, because it's not right. And if we don't do these little things, then we're never going to achieve the big things. And you've done that here in GoRuck, and that adherence to quality is something that has been a core staple of it. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, the phrase is the relentless pursuit of excellence, right? And you learn all these phrases in the military.
Books of them.
And it is something that, it's just very impactful. I mean, my grandfathers were both, and all my grandparents were very impactful in my life. My family was impactful. The special forces came later in life and was very impactful. My wife is very impactful. But there's all these kind of life lessons that you're just mentored in the Army. And so this idea around quality, I mean, I just see problems all the time. Like, to pull it back a little bit, I mean, I hate everything until I don't. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that everybody's built like this.
No, they're not.
And it's one of those things where it can be insufferable to be around. Like, I literally cannot look at this right now, because this one thing is I can't even, it just bothers me so much. The next sample has to fix this. And it's like, but this is supposed to be done, It's like, no. This one thing right here, whatever it is, or this thing is rubbing right here. Every time I feel it, it just bothers me, Well, it's got to change the whole, well, then it's got to change the whole everything, Because if I'm not special, that's the other thing. I'm not special. And if this hurts me this way, or that bothers me, the thing is that I'm just more sensitive to it, perhaps. So you see something, hey, this is a major problem. These shoulder straps are right here, and they're too close because it's too close on the neck. It's like, oh, well, you're this, your body type's this, everybody's different. I'm like, maybe everybody's different, but this is terrible for me. Mm-hmm. So let's fix that, right? And then it's just kind of, I mean, I could go on and on. I'm kind of speaking in riddles or without getting really specific about the whole process. But the process of designing gear and coming out with that gear, it is meant to be perfect when it comes out. And yet it can't be perfect. Everything has a breaking point. Everything has a failure point. So perfection is never a standard. It just reminds you of Special Forces, right? You're supposed to be perfect, but you'll never be perfect. And you know who is pushing really, really hard to get after that standard. And that's what the culture is. It's just iron sharpening iron. And so for us, it becomes about the culture. It becomes about always look to do it better and simpler. That's the trick, man, too, is the more complex and complicated that you get, the more stuff that goes wrong. And so you just have to use it and abuse it and test it, and there's no magic button. There's no kind of, oh, well, here's the blueprint, just follow this, and then you'll know that it's like, it doesn't work like that. But if you ever have that doubt, right, that creeps up that says this is terrible, or I don't like this, or this could be better if, I feel like a lot of social norms have taught us not to bring that stuff up. And I feel like if you live that way in Special Forces, you will not be in Special Forces long, because you are always looking for the better way. And that's why it's like, General Tovo, who's the chairman of the board at GBF, you know him well. We both served under him, right? Yeah. He's like, look, Green Berets are professional problem solvers, and to solve problems, you have to always be looking for what's wrong. You're always looking for 360-degree security. You're always thinking about the enemy. You're thinking, how would I attack if? Where's my weak points? Where is this? What's going to go wrong? And once you've kind of covered that, what you'll find is, well, we're set up pretty good. Life has risk. Mm-hmm. Bad stuff can still happen, and it can and it will. But when your head is always on a swivel, more Army phrases, right? Then you're triaging all the time. And it's different than, say, my dad, God bless him, he was in the Union in Ohio for 41 years as a pressman. He just doesn't think like this. He's like the happiest guy I know, Like, he works on his Harleys, and, when he gets home, he drinks a couple beers, he wakes up, he goes back to work. He's got a project list at the house 1,000,000 miles long. That's just not how I work.
You said too, though, about GoRuck, and I want to bring this up because I think it's really pertinent in what you're saying, and it drives this point home. You said GoRuck was not some hero's journey. It certainly didn't feel like one. It still doesn't. I think that's a really important phrase. We talk about entrepreneurism in a lot of our episodes when we highlight conversations with CEOs and founders, and not one of them has looked back and told me everything was perfect. There's always these ebbs and these flows. As you've built this company and you've gone now into, you've referenced $100 million, that you've taken this thing from zero to $100 million over time, and you look for the next phase. Where's it going? Because you just talked about having to push the envelope. We talk about curiosity as one of those 9 core characteristics of elite performance, right? Are we challenging the status quo? Are we looking to the next to make it better? How are we actually going to do that? What's the next step for the company?
So back to kind of COVID was clarity, right? And my fear, if you will, healthy fear, skepticism, risk assessment on GoRuck is that it has the potential to drift into, we build the best gear, let's be a gear company. Mm-hmm. That can be a cultural thing because it is, it's simpler in some ways just to build stuff and sell it, right? It's not something that I necessarily want to be as much a part of when it gets like that. So I fight it with all my soul, and because I care about people and these lessons in special forces are humans are more important than hardware, right?
Soft truth number one.
Soft truth number one, yep. Right? You will remember these, and it's exactly right. And if you go back to them and you say, okay, this is how this applies. And so, fighting for our way of life, which to me is the special forces way of life. It's real world, it's community, it's camaraderie, it's doing hard things, it's fulfillment, it's, it's purpose. It's all of those things that are great. They make us happy, right? Notice I didn't mention money, and so when you look at, okay, how do we serve this mission for our GoRuck community? And when I say community, I mean real world communities in our case. So we have 500 GoRuck clubs around the country. And those are independent, community-led ruck club leaders who organize people close to them. And they go out and they go for rucks, or they do PT in the park, or they go out to dinner. They social fitness, right? Whatever form that might take. But it's real people in the real world. And we say, this is what we are fortunate to be able to serve, is people that have bought into this idea of let's come together and be together, right? And do some stuff that's good for us, right? Because I believe that now more than ever we need that, right? In the heels of COVID. So there was a guy on our board named BJ Nadel who had met, and was on the GoRuck board for long before this. And he's old COO of Nike Plus. So he put 4 number 1 apps in the App Store.
That's
right?
it?
Yeah, that's
just
it.
4.
Just 4. He and his team, of course. And so it was kind of like, okay, should we build a GoRuck app? And everybody does this. It's always proprietary, and you come and you do the thing that the brand is doing. He's like, go look at the Nike app now, and it's a vessel to sell more sneakers, right? So what we wanted to do, though, was take these communities and these community leaders and really empower them, force multiply them to bring other people into, the ecosystem, if you will, because businesses face a problem of how do you get new people? And I think one of the worst ways you can look to do that is to go spend a bunch of money on metaverse ads. You're just buying mercenaries. They're not loyal to the cause, And so it's a never-ending stream of Facebook and Meta. They tell you how much ad you spend and how great it was, and when it comes out in the wash, the only person that won is the company laughing at you, right? Because their shares went up, right? That's just the economics that we've seen. But how do you do proper community building? Okay, so let's start with this assumption, which we've already talked about. Technology is a tool. It is meant to empower us, but humans are more important than hardware. So how do we sync that up in the real world? And so we started something called Sandlot Technology, which is basically a geospatial fitness app, right? And what that means is it focuses on people meeting up in the real world and making it so you open it up, you see a map. And on that map, you'll see the activities that are going on around you, whether it's going to start and is now starting with all the GoRuck clubs, 500 plus of them spread out. And then it gets into other people leading independent boot camps or leading yoga classes, or 15,000 run clubs can go on there. And it's given the big tools to the little guys. And then you've got these different verticals, but we're still all active people. It's okay if you like to run. It's okay. It's great if you like to ruck. It's better if you like to ruck, but it's okay if you like to run, right? You want to do yoga on the beach in the middle of a pandemic, right? There's yoga instructors who are out there on the beach, hustling for, hey, Venmo me $10 at the end of this class, right? And let's get outside and empower more of these leaders, these trainers, to hold these classes and these sessions, whatever we want to call them, outside and kind of bring more people together in real world social fitness.
I found this interesting because you said, quote, our mission is to empower trainers. Trainers are the glue of the organizations. This is not a hustle for you, and that fitness is ripe for disruption. And I think that when I think about this app that you're building here, these events, they're being sourced by the people who are conducting them, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. I mean, this is Green Beret 101, SF 101, right? So So what I mean by the trainers are the glue as well is when you go to wherever and you take the class, you're there with a trainer. The trainer is the one kind of leading the session, and you rate or rank your experience in your own mind or in whatever the reviews that you leave based upon that trainer had a big part to do with it. The people that show up have another big part.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the trainer is the leader. And so right now the economics are not good. Right? So for the trainers, I mean, if you have a trainer and they spend 30 minutes, they drive to the CrossFit box or to the gym, the Globo gym, they lead a class for an hour, they get paid $20-$25. I'm sure there's some inflation, right, going on, but 30 minutes to get home, you're looking at $10-$15 an hour, right, to lead these classes. And a lot of the gyms aren't making any money either. So you've got this kind of, the economics are not right. And you say, okay, so what if any trainer could pop up any class anywhere they wanted to and charge whatever they wanted to? And the infrastructure could be the parks. It could be sandbags in the back of their pickup truck. It could be they can use the beach. They can use whatever they want. And and we will get religious about supporting the trainers' efforts to monetize their training. And we think that the world needs more trainers, not fewer. We think that we need to be more active together in the real world, not less. And this idea of, you know, you're working out on, or you're working in front of your screen all day, you're zooming and all these important things, and then, you know, Mr. Spandex on your Peloton app is telling you to pedal faster. I mean, it's just staring at him on a screen. I mean, come on, people. Like, but what we owe as technology is we need to make it accessible for people to provide this alternative that is better. Because it's hard. How do people find people anymore? Increasingly, people don't, and they seem not to want to. And that's the biggest problem, right? Is you just kind of give up. You just kind of say, I don't know where to go to meet people. And you just kind of, people become more private and more reclusive. And by the way, in the last 2 years, every single measure of human health is worse than it was 2 years ago. And this idea that we don't lack knowledge. We don't lack technology. We don't lack access. We have everything, quote, quote, but it's not working. So, you know, the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. It's not working. We need to be part of real world communities that come together. And our position and what we're fighting for is a technology platform that makes that at the heart of the experience.
What did you take away from building GoRuck that you apply into this new endeavor?
So I still see stuff at GoRuck, and I have a unique vantage point here. And
in what way?
Well, I've been around for all of it, you know? And so I can see, it's kind of like if you're on the range, right? And you're shooting at a 10-meter target, and you're you're a millimeter off in where the barrel is pointing. You're still going to hit the 10-meter target.
Yeah.
When you start to look at a kilometer away and that target, a millimeter, and you're not even going to hit the paper.
Right, yeah, you're not even close.
Right? You're not even close. And so what I have seen is the importance of establishing certain cultural norms and just the trends. The people follow the cultural norms of the leadership. And so the certain things that go in at an early stage have enormous ripple effects later on. And so, you know, I'll give you an example with GoRuck relative to Sandlot is this idea of what I learned really early on at GoRuck is that we have to over communicate. You might say it's not possible, and in which case you would be correct, right? I don't mean sizzle videos. I don't mean glitz and glam. I don't mean trying to be cute. Like we need to over communicate the value statement. Why? Mm-hmm. What are we doing and why? We go through all of this trouble and all of this pain to create something that we really believe in, that we put out there into the world, and we ask people to spend hard-earned dollars to buy. And we need to communicate why. Mm-hmm. And so with Sandlot, it's been, we need to take that same approach. And, you know, so since the beginning, for the last almost year, we've had a weekly newsletter that goes out that features people in the community. It features some behind the scenes, how we're building the technology app. Here's the progress that's going on. Because one of the big takeaways is another big takeaway I should say is it gets really easy to try to appeal to the people that you think are buying your product right now, right? But how did they find out about it? The world is people, marketers especially, are looking for complete and absolute attribution. They want to know exactly where everybody came from. It's like as if there's no faith left in the galaxy, and magic doesn't exist from human connection, and word of mouth doesn't matter. Like, I think it matters more than anything else. And so if you create a great service or a great product and you keep at it, keep telling that story, the people that love that product and use that service, they are the ones that are climbing the mountaintops with you, and they will be the ones that are screaming at the top of this mountaintop while you're on that slow journey up the next one, and then they're the first ones to join you on the next mountaintop. And you have to keep these snake eaters that are just at the tip of the spear for you. You have to keep them fed. And you have to make sure that you take care of them, even though it's like, is it favoritism? Is it, I don't know. I don't know what the perfect word to describe it is, but you need those evangelists, and you need to take good care of them, and you need to over communicate them. And when they know the why, it's like nobody wants to be Bravo Right Rifle on a patrol.
That's the guy who stays in the back and isn't allowed to talk
and knows nothing that's going on. Oh, decisions were made. I have no idea, right? And so just keep moving forward, one foot after the other.
Everybody else.
You got to know the why, and if you treat the people that are supporting you with, most importantly, time and energy and money, keep them looped in. They don't need to know every single detail. Life's a busy place, but give them the top stuff and do it consistently. That's the thing. One blog post ain't going to save anything, right? You do one of these a week. If it's magic, you say, man, the next one, it's with this great person, and I can take 8 weeks off because it's going to be so awesome, right? It doesn't work like that. You have to be consistent about things, and those are the habits that determine kind of our lives.
Well, habits set the foundation for everything. I'm about to ask you here in a few minutes about your habits. But before we do, I want to know, what's the timeline on it, on Sandlot?
The technology app is out.
Yeah.
So the other, okay, so here's another lesson is you need these big giant forcing functions. And the Sandlot Jax Fitness Festival was an enormous forcing function for the technology app, which we haven't started because nobody cares yet. But once we kind of say, hey, the entire schedule is going to be inside of the technology app, and it's already preloaded, and look, and here you go. And oh, by the way, there's other training classes in town. And then you go back to your town and you say, oh, there's some stuff here too. Look, it's kind of like a truly social network. So it's live in the Google Play Android store and in the iOS store now. And so it's out. Was there something else there? Sorry.
No, that's it. No, that's what I wanted to know. I wanted.
And then there's just the cadence, the cadence of, you have to have things that you come back to, like one great episode of anything, or one great product that you release and you stop talking about, or you have to keep the drumbeat going, and that requires energy and purpose and focus and all of those things. And when you don't talk about or don't focus on stuff, it goes away. It just drifts. It just dies a slow death eventually. And so that you've got to keep charging those hills. And so annualizing the fitness festival is a really important thing. Like, we are gravitated towards that. Like, this will be an annual thing because it's serving a lot of these. Bring the people together. The partners are coming. We're seeing them in the real world, which is human, not dehumanized. Right. It's human. You see these people that you like and that you believe in and that you love the missions that they're fighting for. And it's like, oh yeah, yes, let's absolutely do that. And we have and will see that happening with other connections being made. You with Jason Kalipa, you with Sarah Wilkinson, right? And that's where the magic is. You know what you owe me for
Besides
meeting
beer?
But well, that's because you did that to yourself right here in this room, right? But what you owe me for those connections is absolutely nothing. I mean, I got a note from Jason Khalipa after your interview, and he's like, "Fran was a total pro. That was awesome. Thank you." Mm-hmm. Right? That is literally about the nicest feedback that because I know how our community works, right? And when I introduce you to somebody and they come back to me and say, that guy was awesome. That's like what we live for.
Yeah.
That is your reputation. That's your staking. Your whole life is based upon stuff like that. And when you make those connections with good people to good people, that's an incredible feeling.
Yeah. And that's fostering the community, and you watch that grow. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I look forward to when I think about both Sandlot Technology and Sandlot Jax Fitness Festival is how does everybody grow year to year, and how do you continue to foster that relationship? And
you think about the festival as a way of bringing the kind of backed into it. It's like, if you're still listening, by the way, thank you, because you're going to get even behind the curtain. Just briefly though, is the technology is meant to be a community of communities. And you bring all the people together, and it makes no sense to anybody out there, right? Because if you have this app, you should do this one thing. It's just, I don't live like that. I like to do lots of things, and I like to know the people that are doing lots of things, and I don't like to have 100 different things. I like to, hey, this is where I go to do this stuff, right? And so the festival is an extension of that. Bring in all these vastly different communities aligned around the mission of health and fitness and activity. Let's be active. Like, let's live life like that and bring them all together. It's just an extension of everything that the technology is driving towards supporting.
Yeah. I want to talk about Green Beret Foundation for a minute. All right, and I think this is really important because you have a commitment to giving back. You guys give 1% back. The Jedburgh Podcast is partnered with the Special Operations Warrior Foundation and General Hutmacher and the team over there down in Tampa. But giving back to the community is so important and so impactful. And we think about the last 20 years. And we think about veteran service organizations, and you have your own foundation here at GoRuck as well. But I believe fundamentally that it has been easy over the last 20 years to keep veterans and veteran advocacy in the top of the fold because we've been at war. We enter a period of time now where our wars maybe are not going to be at the top of the fold. At least we don't believe so. Anything can happen any one day, and this situation, certainly in Russia, and Ukraine, could put us all there very quickly. But I bring it up because we want to keep veteran advocacy at the top of the conversation. We want to keep the transition of veterans out of the military at the top of the conversation. It's something that I've been focused a lot on in a lot of my work, is how do we get good people out? How do we put them into roles in the real world so that they don't necessarily have to go through some of the struggles that you did, that I did as we transition? How can we best set them up for success? But can you just talk a minute about the Green Beret Foundation, your work with General Tovo and the team over there, and how do we get involved with the Green Beret Foundation?
So when I first showed up at group, the first counseling statement that I had, I was in the.
How long did that take?
I was there. It was pretty short. It was like, hey, you know nothing. Sign this. These are my expectations of you. Any questions? Nope. Good. Read it. Memorize. Whatever. But at the top was, those to whom much is given, much is expected. Mm-hmm. And that was at the top of my counseling statement. And I'm thinking, like, man, I'm this badass Green Beret. It's time for me to, let's get after it. Me. Like a little bit, right? Because you're king of the universe when you put that Green Beret on. But it's like, no. You owe more now. Not less. You owe more. And it's not about you at all. Right? And so that's just another lesson that really stuck with me. But you have to act on that. And so since the beginning, I've been attached to Green Beret Foundation in some way, shape, or form since the very, very beginning, right? And raising awareness or funds or whatever the case may be. And, it made sense at one point for me to come on and serve on the board of directors. And then I rope-a-doped General Tovo who was our group commander, who later went on to earn his 3rd star, right? Lieutenant General Tovo. And he's a fantastic mentor to me. Like you kind of get to pick your own mentors. They don't have to agree even, right? You just kind of learn by how they conduct business and how they lead their lives. And, that's been one of the great honors. Think about it. Like, I was the lowest guy in 10th Special Forces Group, and he was the group commander when we were at war together in 2007. And we're on the board. He's the chairman, and I'm happy. I'll work for that man on anything he wants to rope-a-dope me into, right? He can return the favor anytime. And then I brought Walt Cooper on as well.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm on the nominating committee. So when I say we vote. But I brought Walt on. And it's just, it feels really good. It helps me sleep at night and I sleep well, to do things the best I can, on the quality of the business and all that stuff. But I think service and giving back and all of that, I think it's just really important. And so that's kind of core to who we are. And culturally, that's really important to us as an organization. And so we just kind of live that life. And specific to Green Beret Foundation, I mean, look, it's something like 60% of all casualties inside of special operations post 9/11 have been Green Berets, have been Army Special Forces. And so the challenges are shifting and changing. I think it's important, though, as well, to remind people out there that we've come a long ways. Like, we as a nation, in supporting our veterans, I mean, we are throwing massive amounts of cash and capital at the veteran transition, veteran health, all of this. It's never going to be good enough, just like, it shouldn't be. Like, just like lots of things should never be good enough, right? Like the health of our kids and not, like, when are we ever going to say, oh man, we've done too much for this? Never, right? So it's just, how can we do what the best we can now, the smartest that we can now? And part of it is advocacy, part of it is awareness, and part of it is kind of telling the story of what it means to serve in that capacity. And so, look, the Green Beret Foundation, deals with any and all problems that arise within the Green Beret community, past and present. That means Vietnam era is Rich, who works here, is 73 or something now, in great health. A lot of the guys are a little older than he is, less great health, all the way through post 9/11 stuff. So if it's, you name the problem, and the Green Beret Foundation supports Green Berets and their families. It's a real simple kind of mission statement like that. And it's a real easy one, and that I'm really proud to get behind and support.
Yeah, they've been a great organization, and actually we want to line up General Tovo for an episode later this year, so we got to get him on here too.
Great.
Talk to him and tell that story, tell his story, and talk more about it in further detail. Jason, as we close out, the Jedburghs in World War II had to do 3 things as core foundational tasks to be successful. They had to be able to shoot, they had to be able to move, and they had to be able to communicate. You probably heard this before. You probably heard of those
once or twice.
Things, yeah. But if they did these 3 things with the utmost precision, then they could actually apply focus on other more complex challenges that came their way. What are the 3 things that you do every day to be successful in your world?
So I've thought some about this, and it's a consistent question that you ask. And, the move and the communicate parts are very true. I mean, this is GoRuck, right? This isn't go sit your ass on a couch and not move. And so when you think about movement, is the only fitness statistic, if you will, that I ever look at is my step count, right? I do. Well, because it's a measure of how well I sleep too. It's directly correlated anecdotally, right? I mean, this idea of 10,000 steps, right? So I build out different ways to get that. And I don't do it every day, but I look at trends, right? I'm not addicted to my watch or to my, it's like some days it doesn't happen and other days it happens massively. But, I walk to work, I ruck to work, or, I'm outside to do that preferably, which is a lot better. The communicate part, right, is trying to answer how to answer this in 3 sound bites is tough. But I will give you a couple anecdotes that I do that really work well for me.
We don't cut anything into sound bites. So
that's fine.
So that's the whole thing.
So my mornings are basically my time for me to process whatever it is that I'm planning or working directly on. Emily says I get nicer and more social as the day goes on. So I've kind of structured my day around what I've learned about myself over time, right? I wake up, I have my coffee, I have these routines. I walk the dog, or I ruck to work, I drop the kids off. Like life gets in the way sometimes, right? But there are times where it requires a lot of focus. And how do we do that? It's not just, you got to focus on this. Like for me, I literally will put single song repeat in with, headphones on. That song can drift or change over time. I have a stable of probably 50 songs maybe. And depending upon whatever it is, I mean, sometimes I'll listen to a song for a week straight for hours and hours on end.
Really?
Yeah. And it's very kind of, certain songs work and certain songs don't. I'll give you an example. I love the Smashing Pumpkins. I grew up with Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. Mm-hmm. I love damn near every song on that album. Two of the greatest songs ever written are Tonight Tonight in 1979.
I know these songs.
So Tonight Tonight is a terrible single song repeat. And I'll tell you why, because it's so dramatic. Right? There's the strings, and there's the hard start, and it just kind of, the bottom drops out. That's very jarring when I'm trying to focus on something on the computer. That song, for whatever reason, it doesn't work. 1979, if you go look at my play count, it's probably, 10,000 or something listens, because there's just a perfect cadence to it. It's never too high. It's never too low. It's just kind of on loop, and it's just a beautiful song. It's like a soundtrack to my nostalgic youth times. It's optimistic. It's hopeful. Mm-hmm. I love it. And so there's always this time of single song repeat while I'm really focused on a certain task at hand, and it works amazingly well. So that works really well. Single song repeat to focus.
I can't do that. If I'm trying to focus, I actually have to shut the music off. See, I need the silence.
So what I've found is when I try to make something silent, it's never silent. And then that becomes jarring unto itself. So I had to kind of, I don't know if train myself to do this was the right thing, but that's how it happened for me. Another thing that works really well is there's this idea of you can work and family and the circuit. And the circuit is something that you're always chasing. This is like one of these recognition in the last, couple years especially, but my kids are 10, 7, and 5, so it becomes, you start to realize that, number one, I'm definitely mortal, right? My kids are the next generation, and I definitely don't have them for very long, right? Before they're out, and I want to spend that time with them now. So, and this is something that I asked, I clarified this in a chatting with John Hankey, actually, because I'm like, John, are you on the circuit at all out in San Francisco? Because he's a big, important tech company. He's like, look, I got a full-time job and I got a family, and those are my two priorities. And so making decisions through that prism of, these are my two priorities, and I can't really have, like, the first can be your family, the second can be your work, your passion. The third, if you start letting the third priority creep in too much, it doesn't work. So processing the decision of, I'm going to go on this trip or this whatever, is this worth it to sacrifice not being here for the dinners I'm going to miss, the picking the kids up, my kids just started jiu-jitsu, right? I mean, taking them to jiu-jitsu and being there to watch that as they kind of, I can't go to everything, right? It's just, there are trade-offs. So if I look at passing decisions through that lens has been kind of transformational. And sometimes, because I'm not like revolutionizing anything. Nobody's a self-made man. And so connecting that dot to an off conversation that I had with John at one point, it's like, how are you doing this? because he's building this enormous, great company with a mission that I love and support, and I really look up to him. And another mentor of mine doesn't have to say yes; he just gets to be right. And it's like, no, I don't have time for that, and I'm really particular about the time that I spend away from my family and the mission that I'm working on, because he drifts like we do into, he can work 1 million hours a week by Wednesday, and what's the point? So that making decisions like that has been really, it's a really good reminder. It's kind of like the reminder that I had before I went in to the Army, which was the regret alarm. If I don't do this, I will regret it for the rest of my life. And that's kind of the counter in the decision-making process here, which is if I know I'm going to regret not doing this or regret doing it, that's a big alarm in my head. I'm like, okay, I need to process this right now. Yeah. And I need to really think about this before I act on whatever's, these alarm bells are going off. And it's just kind of, those are so intertwined for me. It's taken me a long time, though, to get to that point where it's not like, oh yeah, I'll go do this, and oh yeah, I'll go do that. And it's like, no, you can be really respectful of people and say, no, I can't do that actually, because I've got to carve out, it's going to take away from this and this and this. And you can say no, it's okay. It allows you to pour more energy into the yeses that you're able to say.
Well, we're always worried about what people will think of us if we say no. And I think that's always becomes one of the hard parts. And then what you mentioned about John too, I think is really insightful, because what you see when someone like John, I don't know John, I look forward to meeting him, and I hope make the intro when we're down here in a couple weeks, but you realize that someone at that level is normal just like the rest of us, and they're undergoing the exact same challenges and have to make those exact same decisions that we're faced with every day. And I think when you see that, it makes it so much easier.
I mean, his youngest kid's into skateboarding and is doing, and it's sort of, he wants to beat it. He wants to see that. Yeah. Like I see how much his eyes light up when he's around his kids and all of that. And these are the trade-offs that we all face. And, we just have to know that we're facing them, and it helps us, we're not alone in facing them. And that really helps us make better decisions, I think.
So I talked about the 9 characteristics of elite performance used by SOF to identify talent, right, and assess talent: drive, resiliency, adaptability, humility, integrity, curiosity, team ability, effective intelligence, and emotional strength. And we always talk about these 9 in the context of, in order to be a high performer, you have to demonstrate these in some way or another. As Green Berets, there was a certain number of these that we were evaluated on. There's 5 that were weighted differently than, for instance, the SEALs. They all come out of the 9, but the SEALs had a different number.
That's fascinating, and I want you to come on our podcast at some point. I'm going to talk a lot about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I love it. I'm like I'm on the receiving end of a lot of that, not on the kind of doctrinal side. So it's fascinating. Anyway, keep going.
No, I'd love to. Yeah, I mean that's a big part of what we break down in so many of our different discussions. But I always say that you have to exhibit these 9, and you have in so many ways. In your book, for anybody who's interested in reading how not to start a backpack company and learn the GoRuck story, learn your story about your personal story with you and Emily. And we didn't get into it here, but fascinating story, and ties so much to what I've gone through, as you, me, and Emily were talking about before we started this. But I always take one at the end of our conversation, and I say that when I think about what we talked about here, when I think about you, when I think about your story, it exhibits it and represents it. And I really think about curiosity when I think about you and the GoRuck story and where you're going with Sandlot, because it is about challenging the status quo. And you mentioned that you're not going to be part of something that becomes stagnant. You're going to be part of something that's pushing the envelope. You want to always find the new opportunity. I believe that is one of the most important traits to be successful in this world, to build something that has true impact. You talked about community. You talked about creating an impact. You talked about giving back. You talked about representing this Special Forces regiment in a way that you can be proud of, that you can sleep well at night, and that all of your and our counterparts will look at and say, I support what they do. I believe that comes back to curiosity. Thank you so much for sharing your story, for welcoming me here today, for the partnership between GoRuck, Sandlot, the Jedburgh Podcast. I can't wait to come back here in a couple weeks. It's going to be a great event. We'll be following up on it.
Thanks, man. Thanks for coming in the real world as God intended. It's much better this way, and I really appreciate it, man. It's awesome. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Sweet. Cool.
American Jedburghs went on to form the foundation of the United States Special Forces and the Special Activities Directorate of the Central Intelligence Agency. Thanks for listening to the Jedburgh Podcast. I'm your creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Join us next week for a new episode on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube for full episodes, highlights, and other behind-the-scenes content. If you like what you heard, give us a like and leave a review. Follow me, Fran Racioppi, Talent War Group, and our sponsor Jersey Mike Subs on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Send your comments and inquiries to media@talentwargroup.com. As former members of Special Operations Forces, the Jedburgh Podcast and Talent War Group contribute a percentage of all profits to Special Operations Warrior Foundation, supporting the families of our fallen warriors. Thanks for joining us on this episode. How you prepare today determines success tomorrow.